who made the best use of it. The United States is not only the freest nation in the world, it is also the wealthiest. Some people think we are rich because of our bountiful natural resources. But if a rich endowment of natural resources can explain wealth, then why are some of the world's poorest people citizens of continents richest in natural resources, such as Africa and South America? By contrast, Japan, Hong Kong, Switzerland, and England are poor in natural resources, but their citizens enjoy living standards among the highest in the world. It is frequently asserted that the Third World is poor because of colonial domination that enriched the mother country at the expense of the colony. But some of the richest nations in the world were colonies. The United States, Canada, and Australia, and Hong Kong remains a colony. By contrast, some of the world's poorest countries were never colonies, such as Ethiopia and Liberia. If colonial exploitation is a satisfactory explanation for Third World poverty, we need a theory to explain the exceptions. Poverty is an uninteresting subject. Poverty has been, and continues to be, man's standard fate throughout his entire history. The reason is simple. People are poor because they cannot produce much that is valued by others. The intriguing question is why a tiny percentage of the world's population, for only a tiny part of man's history, has been spared man's usual fate. If we could answer that question, America's wealth could be readily duplicated throughout the world. While nobody has the complete answer, there are some clues, hunches, and bits of circumstantial evidence. Freedom is the connection. Where we find riches, we tend to find freer people. An examination of Amnesty International's listing of human rights abuses shows a definite pattern where those nations with the least respect for human rights are also the poorest. By contrast, those with the greatest respect for human rights tend to be the richest. Such a finding is consistent with philosopher-economist Adam Smith's proposition in his famous book, An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations. Current rhetoric sees Smith's advocacy of laissez-faire as an apology for greedy businessmen at the expense of the common man. That is a grievously wrong assessment of Adam Smith's message. In fact, I challenge any reader to find a single passage in The Wealth of Nations that can be reasonably interpreted as pro-business. Smith, a moral philosopher, was laying out a moral way for men to interact with one another. Smith argues that voluntary association is the moral way for men to interact, and that it produces riches as an unintended result. The Wealth of Nations, published in 1776, had a profound influence on the framers of the Constitution. Adam Smith saw government as a referee, not a player in the game of life. For Smith, the legitimate role of the government was national defense, adjudication of disputes, and provision of some public goods. In 1801, Thomas Jefferson echoed these sentiments in his first inaugural address. A wise and frugal government, which shall restrain men from injuring one another, which shall leave them otherwise free to regulate their own pursuits of industry and improvement, and shall not take from the mouth of labor the bread it has earned. This is the sum of good government. The American values of limited government and personal freedom have been under assault for nearly a century. Out of a misguided sense of concern for our fellow man, we have permitted, and even called for, government to restrain many important freedoms. The tragedy is that most Americans do not realize or appreciate what is happening. They do not understand that our freedom is being reduced by small bits at a time. The late Leonard Read of the Foundation for Economic Education said that Americans will never lose their freedom all at once. Such an attempt would encounter massive resistance. To take American freedom, Read continued, was like cooking a frog. Read warned, you cannot cook a frog by tossing him into a pot of boiling water. The frog's reflexes are so quick that as soon as his feet touch the water, he would leap out and escape. The way to cook a frog is to put him in a pot of cold water and turn up the heat a little at a time. By the time the frog realized he was being cooked, it would be too late. That scenario explains what has been happening in America. We have not been losing freedom in big, noticeable chunks. We have been losing it little by little. Erosion of our personal freedoms in the name of higher ideals is the theme of this selected collection of my nationally syndicated columns, which were published in roughly 80 newspapers in the United States from 1982 to 1987. I have no shame in admitting my uncompromising bias for the sanctity of personal freedom, and freely admit that as economist qua columnist, I try to sell